Hello DSci 2000. In this video, I'm going to cover data manipulation in Access. I don't know why Microsoft decided to do this, but for some reason, Access is only available in Windows. You can't get Access for Mac. If you have a Mac, I am not expecting you to download Access. However, I will be including Access questions on the quiz. Just make sure you at least get the main ideas of the limitations of Access and how Access generally works if you have a Mac. I'm not going to be assigning any homework assignments based on Access given this limitation. However, a lot of companies still use Windows, so you need to be aware of Access. In Excel, you create XLSX documents. These are the Excel workbooks, which consist of worksheets. In Access, you create Access databases, which have the extension ACCDB. Instead of worksheets, which Excel workbooks hold, ACCDB documents hold tables and queries. Tables and queries being what you would see also in a SQL database. Also, similar to Excel, unfortunately, you can't keep track of the steps that you've done in an Access document. So if you're going to document anything that you've done to an Access file, you should probably save changes as you hit certain milestones, or you just document everything through a text file. So in addition to that, as you might imagine, it is not easy to do version control in Access. Also, as you might recall, Excel has a row limit and a column limit. Access databases have a size limit. Access databases cannot exceed 2 gigabytes. If at any point, even if you are not saving the output that you get from a query in an Access database, if at any point you have an Access database that has 2 gigabytes, even for a few seconds, your Access database will be corrupted and it will no longer exist. That has happened to me. It is terrible. The easy solution, in my opinion, to this would be simply just don't use Access. Unfortunately, people still use Access. Just make sure you're aware of its limits. Access will be saving your work in real time. This isn't like Excel where you have to actually go out of your way to save something. Access, as you do something, will be saved. So that's why you have to be extra careful about what it is you do in Access. Because if you do something in Access, it will probably be saved. And if you save a bunch of stuff and you exceed your 2 gigabyte limits, there goes your Access database. It will no longer exist. Be careful. Just make sure you're aware of the fact that Access has such a limit. So now let's discuss reading in the simulated MN salaries CSV file into Access. I'm going to start off by opening up Access. And I'm going to click on blank database. This blank database by default has this table called Table 1. I don't need it. I'm just going to get rid of it. I'm going to right-click Table 1 and just hit Close. So now that table is gone, let's bring in simulated MN salaries.csv into Access. Click on External Data, and then go to New Data Source, From File, Text File. Now here, you're going to browse to your DSci 2000 folder, go to your data files folder, and then go to simulated mnsalaries.csv. Make sure that import the source data into a new table in the current database is checked, and let's press OK. Remember, this is the CSV file. CSV, remember, means comma-separated values. So we have characters such as commas or tabs that are separating each field, as you see here, given by the fact that each value is separated by a comma. So we should choose delimited. Let's hit Next. And we have comma separators, so we'll stick with that. Our first row contains our field name, so let's check that. Click Next. We don't need to do anything here. This is going to seem kind of odd. Just do this just to make your life easier. Hit no primary key. And at this point, you can just hit finish. So then Access will ask you if you want to save your import steps. We're not going to bother. Just hit close. Next, we are going to import cities.csv. Same process. New data source, from file, text file, browse to the cities.csv file, import the source data, press OK. We're going to choose delimited again because it still is a CSV file. Hit Next. First row contains field names, comma, we're good. We're not going to do anything here. Choose no primary key and hit finish. Access will ask you if you want to save your import steps. We're not going to bother. Hit close. We have created an Access database with 2 tables inside it. Everything that we're going to do in Access is going to be in what is known as the query design view. I'm going to show you how to get there. So let's go to Access. Let's choose Create, then Query Design. So this will bring you to this screen, which is known as the Query Design view. Toward the right, you can see that our tables are there. Please double-click only the Simulated MN Salaries table. And now we have brought the Simulated MN Salaries table in here. I'm going to close this up. The next thing I want you to observe is the following. This is simulated MN salaries. We have our columns here in the table, ID, year, salary, sex, and race. But we also have this star right here. A lot of Access is at least somewhat related to SQL. So remember in SQL that when you use select star on a query, that it selects all columns. If I were to double click this star right here, it would generate a query in Access that would output all columns, just like select star would in SQL. So that's just one thing to be aware of. So now let's start getting to data manipulation and Access. The first thing I want to go through is filtering. What we did in dplyr was we wanted only the records where sex was equal to F, year was equal to 2008, and race was equal to white. Here's how you do this in Access. We still want all columns to be in the output. We only just want certain rows. So given that we still want all columns to be showing up, let's just double click the star to make sure that all columns show up. And if I were to extend this cell, you would see that simulated mn salaries.star has been added as a field in our Access query. This has the same meaning as it does in SQL, in that it selects all columns from the simulated mn salaries table. Now, we want only the records where year is 2008, sex is equal to F, and race is equal to white. So here's what I'm going to do. In this simulated MN salaries block, I'm going to double click the following: year, sex, and race. We're already displaying all columns with this first simulated MN salaries.star here. We don't need to show year, sex, and race again because they're already going to show up in the star. So I'm just going to uncheck those, because that will just be unnecessary. Now we want to filter on year, sex, and race. How you filter in Access is you put it under the criteria row. So year is going to be equal to 2008, sex is going to be equal to F, and race is going to be equal to white. So that is how you do filtering in Access. And now let's show the outputs. I'm going to scroll up, and I'm going to hit run. And you'll notice that these pound signs are here. That just means that the column is too small to show the entirety of that column. So if I go right between the salary and the sex columns, my cursor is going to look like this black T right here. I'm just going to double click that, and it will show me the actual salary values. So we see here that we have records with year equal to 2008, sex equal to F, and race equal to white. So that is how you do filtering in Access. To go back to design view, what you do is you right click this query 1, and then you click design view. If you wish, you can hit Control S to save this query, and then you can just start another query using create, then query design. But I'm not going to go there. I am personally not going to save these. And on top of that, it's impossible to actually record all the steps you did to create the query. So I'm not going to bother saving it, but if you want to save it, you can. Now next, in dplyr, what we had done was we had filtered for all records of simulated MN salaries where sex was equal to F or sex was NA. Just like in SQL, NAs are null in Access. So if I want sex equal to F or sex is NA, this is how you would do it. First of all, I don't need the year or race filters anymore. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hover over this grayish area over the year column right here. And notice that my cursor turns into an arrow. I'm going to do a left click and then hit delete on my keyboard. That will just get rid of that filter. I'm going to do the same thing for race right here and hit delete. And now we want sex to be equal to F, or it can be null. So observe that we have criteria equal to F, but we also want sex to be null. So we're going to do under or is null. And now let's hit the run button by scrolling up, going to design, and then run. If I were to scroll through this entire table, you would find that sex either has values F or null. Let's go back to design view and back to the slides. Let's talk about renaming columns. So just like in SQL, if you actually want a column, you have to explicitly state that you want it. So going back over here, I'm just going to get rid of these two columns. You can actually select multiple columns like so. So I selected this one using that arrow process I showed you earlier. But if I hold shift and I do the arrow thing and click again and hit delete, I can select multiple columns that are right next to each other. So I want to change ID to new ID. And I still want all columns to appear. The first thing I'm going to do is this. I'm just going to manually double click through all 5 of these columns. Access throws them in here, and we want to change a new ID to ID. How you do that is this. Simply stick new underscore ID with a colon to the left of ID. And now let's run this query. And now you can see that ID is now new ID. Let's go back to design view. The next thing that we did in dplyr was we only selected particular columns we were interested in, which were the year and the salary columns. How you would do this in Access is as follows. We can just take what we have here and just delete everything except the year and the salary columns. So if I want to get rid of the new ID column, sex column, and the race column, I can just go under every column and hit delete with the arrow. And now I've selected only the year and the salary columns. I'm going to hit run. And you can see here that only the year and salary columns have been selected. Go back to design view, and let's go back to the slides. Another thing we had done was we had looked for all possible unique pairs of race and sex that exist in the data. Here's how you do that in Access. I'm just going to get rid of these columns. And we want to double click on race and sex. But we only want the unique values. So here's how you would handle that. Let's right click on another cell that hasn't been taken and then go to properties. This will do the following. To the right, you will see something that says unique values. Let's make this yes. What that will do is that will give us the unique unduplicated records based on the columns that we have chosen. Let's go to the left and scroll up and hit run. So if I were to extend these columns, I would have all possibilities of race and sex that exist in the data. Let's go back to design view. Creation of new columns. So remember what we did in dplyr was we took the original data frame and we stuck salary Canadian, which was 1.33 times salary, to the right of simulated MN salaries. Here's how you would do that. First of all, make sure that on the right over here that you change unique values back to no. Let's just close this property sheet. And then let's get rid of these columns. The first thing is I still want everything in simulated MN salaries to show up. So I'm going to double click on the star. And then I'm going to add in the salary Canadian field. I'm going to extend this just so you see what I'm typing. I'm going to do salary underscore Canadian colon 1.33 times salary. And I just hit tab there just to move out of that cell. So let's hit the run button. And you can see here that if I were to extend this, that salary Canadian is going to be 1.33 times salary. So that is how you create a calculated field in Access. Let's right click and go back to design view and go back to the slides. Let's talk about case when. So I had you do this on your own in dplyr because it's a lot of typing. If you wanted to do this in Access, you would have to type this entire set of characters into one cell, as you see right here. It's very similar to what you would do in Excel. If in Excel is just IIF in Access. I don't know why they chose that, but that's just what they chose. If you want to type this all into one cell in Access, I will let you do that on your own. Let's talk about sorting by columns. So remember what we did in dplyr was we had sorted simulated MN salaries by year and salary both in descending order. Here's how you would do that in Access. So first of all, we don't need salary Canadian anymore. Let's just delete that. And here we had simulated MN salaries dot star. So we still want that because we still want all fields to show up. And we were sorting by year and salary in descending order. Let's scroll up. I'm going to double click on year and salary. We don't need year and salary to show up twice because they'll already be in the star. So I'm going to uncheck their show, and sort will be descending for both of them. I hit tab and then descending again and then tab. Let's scroll up and hit run. So you can see here that within 2015 that salaries are ordered in descending order, and you can scroll through the table to see that year will be in descending order overall as well. Let's go back to design view, go back to the slides. Aggregation. So what you have to do with aggregation is a little bit different here. So here's what we're going to do. You're going to notice a lot of similarities with the SQL syntax. So I'm going to get rid of everything that's in here. And we want to calculate average salary by year and by sex. This does not allow you to do aggregation as it stands right now. It's just pulling fields. So we have to add in additional functionality so that Access knows that we're doing aggregation. Let's scroll up, and under design, you'll notice that there's this thing called totals. Please click on that and let's scroll down. You'll notice that things have shifted a little bit. Now we have this additional total row. So let's think about what it is we want here. We want average salary by year and by sex. So the first field is going to be year. I'm going to scroll up and I'm going to double click year, and then I'm going to double click sex, And we want average salary, so I'm going to click salary. This is going to be very similar to SQL, as well as dplyr. We're doing a group by based on year and sex, but we want average salary. So we need to change this group by, I'm going to click this arrow to average. Let's scroll up and hit run. And you can see here that we now have average salary by year and sex. Let's right click and go to design view and go back to the slides. Now, in addition, let's say that we wanted this for Asians only. The only difference is you would need to add a race field and you would need to add equals Asian in the criteria and make sure that the total is where. Remember, where in SQL is what we'd used for filtering before aggregation. So let's go ahead and do that. If we want average salary by year and sex for Asians only, we just need to add the race column. Let's double click that. The race column has been added here. We are going to choose where, and the criteria will be equals Asian. Scroll up, hit run, and this is average salary by year and sex for Asians only. Let's right click and go back to design view and go back to the slides. Now let's talk about joins in Access. In order to do a join, we have to include the cities table in here as well. We had already imported it, so now let's bring it into our design view. So here's what you're going to do. Toward the top, make sure that design is selected. Let's go to add tables. Let's scroll to the right and double click cities. And let's X this out. And now we have both simulated MN salaries and cities in here. Also, before I do anything else, I'm going to make sure that aggregation is gone. I'm going to scroll up. I'm going to click totals just to make sure it's not shaded anymore. And down here, I'm just going to delete everything. So what had we done in dplyr? We had done inner joins, left joins, right joins, and full joins based on the ID columns in DF and cities. So here's how you do an inner join. What you do is the following. Click and hold on the simulated MN salaries ID and then drag to the corresponding ID in cities. Watch what Access does. It adds a line in between those two IDs. And if I were to double click on this line, it would tell me what columns the join affects, which is the simulated MN salaries ID and the cities ID, which is what I want. And then I can choose from 3 different types of joins. The first one says only include rows where the join fields from both tables are equal. That is an inner join. The second one says include all records from simulated MN salaries and only those records from cities where the join fields are equal. So we are using simulated MN salaries as the source table for IDs. This is a left join between simulated MN salaries and cities. Third one says include all records from cities and only those records from simulated MN salaries where the join fields are equal. This is using cities as the source table and relying on those IDs and then appending simulated MN salaries where appropriate. So number 3 is the right join. So options 1, 2, and 3 are just the inner join, the left join, and the right join respectively. And by default, the inner join is what is selected. You can choose what columns you want by double-clicking the corresponding column names. So here, for example, right now we're assuming that this is an inner join, so let's just take everything from simulated MN salaries by double-clicking the asterisk, and then sticking city to the right of it. And now let's hit run, and you can see that we have the simulated MN salaries data with city appended to the right of it. Go back to design view. This is just summarizing the fact that I told you that out of these 3 options, 1 is the inner join, 2 is the left join, and 3 is the right join. Access does not have a full join. Another thing that you should know about when it comes to Access is the following. So here we had performed an inner join between simulated MN salaries and cities based on the ID columns. And we had shown everything in simulated MN salaries as well as the city column in cities. If I were to right click this query 1 right here, I can go into SQL view and you can find the equivalent SQL code that was used to generate that query. Now, the one thing I want you to be aware of, though, is that this is not the same as T-SQL. Access SQL looks very similar, but it's not exactly the same. For example, there is a semicolon at the end of the SQL statement. T-SQL does not use semicolons at the end of statements. If you ever use Oracle or PL SQL in a job, you will get into the habit of throwing semicolons at the end of your SQL queries, but SQL Server or T-SQL does not require that. The main point I want to make gimmick is this. You're going to see the SQL code and you might think it's the same as T-SQL. It is not. Access SQL is its own thing. I don't even know why they have it, honestly, because you can't easily use it to translate into a SQL database, but it is there. Just make sure you understand that it's not the same as T-SQL. Let's go back to design view. And the rest of these slides discuss how to connect Access to an ODBC connection. I'm not going to do that here. I hope you don't run into a situation where you have to do that. But in case you have to, you can read the rest of these slides. And I'm just going to close this. I'll hit no. And that's all I have for you.